4:30 p.m. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the mirrored tower blocks of downtown, coating the office in the kind of pale amber that makes everything appear more honest than it should. The light cut across the rows of cubicles like bright surgical blades, glancing off monitors, highlighting the film of dust that collected where no one dared wipe. Arthur sat perfectly still at his desk. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, suspended mid-movement like a marionette whose strings had tangled. The spreadsheet before him pulsed, formulas updating, numbers realigning, graphs reshaping themselves into symmetrical perfection. He didn't blink often enough. The fluorescent tubes murmured above his head, a high, almost imperceptible whine that pressed inside his skull. His thinning skin began to prickle beneath his synthetic shirt. He could feel the light touching him, not warmth, but intrusion. The photons burrowed through him like needles, and his veins flinched. He breathed out through his nose, quietly, deliberately, so no one would notice. But lately, people always noticed.
Across the aisle, Elena glanced over the top of her monitor again. She had been watching him more than she cared to admit. There was something in the way he moved, too smooth, too deliberate, like a dancer performing gestures he'd memorized but not quite understood. Arthur reached for his water bottle, a 2-liter jug always at his side. He unscrewed the lid and drained it in less than 10 seconds. The sound of him swallowing was obscene, urgent, moist, gulping. Elena winced and quickly turned back to her work. "Jesus," murmured Ben from the next cubicle. "He's going to drown himself one day." Elena forced a smile. "At least he's hydrated." But her eyes flicked, unbidden, back to the desk beyond. Arthur was already refilling the bottle, a plastic gallon jug hidden under his desk. When he lifted it, she saw a ribbon of something shimmer on the keyboard. Thin, slick, iridescent. Not water, too heavy, too alive. By 5 p.m., the office had begun to drain of chatter. People were finishing up, exchanging weary smiles and short goodbyes. But that day, no one left. Mr. Thorne's voice boomed from the glass-walled conference room. "All right, listen up." He was the kind of man who still thought yelling was leadership. "Corporate just pushed the deadline. New client expecting final deliverables by sunrise. Nobody's leaving until it's done." A series of groans rolled across the cubicles. Someone muttered something obscene. "The system's already locking down after hours," he continued, tapping on his tablet. "Doors sealed at 6. We'll order food. It's one night, team. Let's dig in." Arthur stared straight ahead. His jaw tightened until it popped. In the corner of his vision, the sun's reflection on the building opposite fractured into 1,000 burning shards. He ran his tongue over the inside of his cheek, feeling a faint metallic taste bloom there. Not tonight. Elena looked at him as the announcement ended. He wasn't moving. His monitor flickered rapidly, 30, maybe 40 times a second, but his pupils didn't adjust. She leaned over and whispered, "You okay, Arthur?" He turned his head a beat too slowly, like he'd had to remember that motion existed. His eyes were pale, luminous gray where brown should have been. "I'm fine," he said softly. His voice was even, too even. "It's temporary." "What is?" He blinked. The movement was almost mechanical. "This." Then he smiled, a careful arrangement of muscles. "Don't worry about it." She forced a laugh. "Right, yeah, late nights kill us all." "I don't die," he said. It wasn't a joke. 5:52 p.m. The sun had dipped below the skyline, and what remained was bruised twilight, light thick and cold and untrustworthy. Arthur excused himself from his desk with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. He walked to the men's room, measured steps, precise angles. A few heads lifted to follow him, but no one spoke. They were already tired, frustrated, glowing faintly blue in the light of their monitors. Inside the bathroom, the hum of the ventilation system was deafening.
He stood before the mirror, hands pressed flat on the sink. His reflection shimmered faintly under the harsh fluorescent bulbs. For a moment, his features seemed to swim, eyes sinking too deep, cheekbones sharp enough to split skin. His throat twitched. Something behind it moved. Arthur gripped the counter as the first wave hit. It began with heat, internal, radiant, consuming. His veins lit like copper wires, glowing faintly through his translucent skin. A sound tore from his chest, not a human sound, not language. The tendons in his neck stretched like cables under strain. His knees buckled as the next convulsion tore through him. Bones splintered, cartilage snapped. His ribs expanded, cracking wetly, realigning into unfamiliar architecture. Skin followed, stretching taut, bubbling in places, forming ghostly translucences. He tried to stifle the noise with his hand, but his fingers were already lengthening, bones knitting and unknitting. The sound of reforming tissue was obscene, wet fabric tearing, muscle cords plucking like broken strings. He stumbled into a stall and slammed the door, clutching his abdomen as something surfaced beneath his sternum, a rhythmic thrum, internal and alien. Outside, laughter. Elena and Ben passing by, still joking bitterly about the lock-in. Normal, human sounds. Arthur pressed his forehead against the cold metal wall and breathed in through his nose. The air was filled with the smell of ozone and iron. The floor beneath him grew slick with secretion, thin, viscous trails that hissed when they touched the tiles. His voice came out as a rasp. Not yet. Not yet. 6 p.m. The lock clicked.
Elena, you seen Arthur? It was nearly 6:20. The office was quiet now, too quiet. The usual clatter of keyboards had slowed to hesitant tapping. Even Mr. Thorne was pacing, muttering to himself. Elena looked up from her station. Bathroom, I think. He's been gone 20 minutes. Thorne frowned. Christ, we don't have time for another meltdown. He looked around the floor. Ben, go get him. Ben sighed, got up reluctantly. If he's puking again, I'm leaving him there. He walked toward the back corridor. The hallway lights flickered once, twice. The hum was louder here, the building's heartbeat thrumming behind the drywall. He pushed open the bathroom door. Arthur? Hey man, boss wants you. The rest of it never formed. There was a smell, ozone, decay, something not yet dead but no longer alive. The floor was wet, not with water. It pulsed faintly, small tremors moving outward like ripples in thick fluid. A soft, rhythmic clicking came from the farthest stall. Arthur? Behind the stall door came a low, guttural sound, an approximation of breath dragged through an unshaped mouth. The door trembled. Dude, if you're screwing around... The door hinges creaked, and for a moment Ben saw something glint beneath the crack, iridescent, undulating. An eye, maybe, or something studying him back from too many angles at once. He stumbled backward. Arthur? The stall door opened. Ben barely managed a scream before it caught in his throat. What stood there was not a body. It was a scaffolding. Organic matter collapsed and rebuilt into impossible symmetry. Skin translucent, webbed with pale veins that pulsed like faint lightning. Where a face should have been, there were layers of motion, surfaces folding, shifting, rearranging into semblances of features and then abandoning the effort. The air vibrated, not a sound but a feeling, pressing deep into his sinuses, into his thoughts. Ben staggered backward into the corridor, gasping. Oh, Jesus. Arthur, what? The lights dimmed. Elena was halfway down the hall when the sound hit her, a wet, snapping rhythm like tendons being pulled apart. Then silence. Elena? Said Thorne sharply from behind her. Where's Ben? She turned, pale. In the bathroom. There's something wrong. But she didn't finish, because the sound began again. Closer now. something dragging itself down the hall. The motion detector lights flickered on in sequence, each one illuminated a little more of the corridor. The first showed Ben's shoe twisted backward. The second showed a glistening trail across the carpet, thick and opalescent. The third— "Get everyone into the conference room, now!" Thorn barked, but she couldn't move, because in the doorway of the hall, something was trying to stand upright. Arthur, or what used to be Arthur, was emerging, still formed around scraps of torn clothing, flesh still rippling under its own reconfiguration. Parts of him were spectral, others calcified. At his center, where a chest might have been, was a cavity pulsing with light, a slow, rhythmic throb like an open wound into another dimension. The thing's limbs extended and retracted as though uncertain of their length, its eyeless head tilted. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once. "Help me." But it wasn't a request, it was mimicry. The lights overhead blew with a pop, plunging the office into half-darkness. Panic spread, screams erupted, chairs overturned, monitors shattered as people ran blind into cubicles. Thorn grabbed Elena by the wrist and pulled her toward the glass conference room. "Move!" They slammed the door shut behind them and killed the lights. Outside, footsteps shuffled wetly. Then silence. Only the faint sound of water dripping. Ozone. Static. Elena whispered, "That's not human." Thorn's face was gray. "Keep quiet." Something pressed against the glass. It was a hand, or something roughly hand-shaped, but it seemed unfinished, still deciding what it should be. The surface shimmered with an oil-slick coloration, veins luminous beneath like circuitry. It dragged slowly downward, leaving behind a smear that hissed faintly where it touched the pane. Elena began to cry silently, her breath catching in tiny gasps. "We're locked in." Thorn swallowed hard. "We stay put until morning. Do you understand? It's still him. It's still Arthur under—" The glass exploded inward. They found Elena hours later, long after the emergency override finally released the doors at dawn. The security footage played back in grainy black and white. IT pulled the logs first, then the risk department, then a team in gray suits who didn't give names. Most of the footage was corrupted, static waves, bursts of light that bent and folded the pixels, but fragments survived. They watched Arthur convulse. They watched the others run. And they watched for 23 minutes as something moved through the cubicles, its shape flickering, sometimes too large for the frame, other times vanishing entirely from sight. What disturbed them most wasn't what they saw, it was what they didn't. Each time the entity passed under a camera, the visual feed lagged, but the sound registered. Rhythmic pulses, like a heartbeat played backward. Frequencies beyond human hearing, captured only as distortion. When the lights finally stabilized, the office was transformed. Walls warped, glass melted into organic sheens. Cubicle dividers now pulsed gently, as if breathing. They found Thorn suspended from the ceiling, fused halfway into the drywall, his expression calm, as though mid-conversation. Elena's body lay curled beneath a desk. Her eyes were open, pupils replaced by faintly glowing motes that flickered with every motion in the room. When they touched her, her skin dissolved at the edges into thin filaments that reached for the nearest light source, like tendrils aching for warmth. Arthur was nowhere, but under his desk there remained a small puddle of iridescent fluid, still trembling, faintly reactive to sound. When one of the techs leaned too close, the fluid rippled toward him. They sealed the building that morning. Corporate sent out condolence statements. Chemical incident, they said. HVAC malfunction. The footage was archived under restricted classification codes. A new team was sent to resume operations. Temporary contractors. Fresh faces. They replaced the carpeting, brought in new chairs, upgraded the lighting to LED. But on certain evenings, just as the sun begins to fall across the mirrored glass,
The air smells faintly of ozone. The desks hum a little under the surface, as if remembering something. And if someone looks too long into the reflection of those windows, they sometimes swear they see an office full of figures working quietly, precise, efficient, tireless, long after the lights have gone out.